The Galactic Dominion had ruled this region of space for over 6,000 years, and in all that time, it had forgotten something important. What it felt like to be afraid. The council chamber of the Dominion reflected that certainty perfectly. The room had no windows because windows implied the possibility that something outside might matter. Dominion architecture rejected such ideas. The walls were black stone polished smooth enough to reflect the blue glow of tactical displays suspended in the air above the council floor. At the center of the chamber stood High Commander Kale Voran. Nearly 3 meters tall, wrapped in ceremonial battle armor dark as obsidian, Voran looked less like a politician and more like a living monument to military victory. His species valued visible strength, and there were few beings in Dominion history more respected than him. He had commanded 41 planetary invasions, 9 interstellar campaigns, 3 rebellion suppressions. He had never lost, not once, which was why nobody questioned him when he activated the holographic image of Earth in the center of the chamber. A small blue world rotated silently before the council. Primitive, divided, weak. Humanity, Voran said calmly, has entered the stage of interstellar expansion far earlier than expected. The hologram shifted. Human cities, human ships, human colonies. Then military analysis reports filled the air around the planet. A council member tilted his head slightly. They still maintain separate governments? Yes, Voran replied. Another counselor laughed quietly. How many? 193 recognized nation-states. The chamber filled with amused murmurs. Fragmented species rarely survived first contact with a superior civilization. History had proven that repeatedly. Voran continued. Their species possesses no natural armor, limited environmental endurance, short lifespans, unstable emotional patterns, and a documented history of internal conflict. A new chart appeared. Projected military outcome. Dominion victory probability. 99.7%. Projected resistance. Low to moderate. Projected campaign duration. 14 months. The council looked pleased. Everything made sense. Everything fit the models. Everything was predictable. Except for one person. Ambassador Sereth remained silent in the far corner of the chamber. Unlike the others, he had actually been to Earth. Twice. He had walked through crowded human cities where millions of people moved like flowing water through steel streets without ever stopping. He had watched exhausted workers laugh after 16-hour shifts. He had seen humans argue violently and then share meals 30 minutes later. Most disturbingly, he had seen how quickly humans adapted to anything. That memory stayed with him now as the council prepared for war. Voran noticed his silence. You disagree, Ambassador? Every eye in the chamber turned toward Sereth. Slowly, the ambassador stood. I believe, he said carefully, that your analysis is incomplete. The room grew quieter. Voran folded his arms. In what way? Sereth looked at the holographic Earth spinning slowly above them. You are studying human technology, he said. You should be studying human history. Several counselors exchanged amused looks. Sereth ignored them. For 40,000 years, humans have existed in continuous conflict. A few expressions shifted slightly. Not concern. Curiosity. The ambassador continued. They fought for resources, for territory, for religion, for pride, for ideology. Sometimes for reasons they barely understood themselves. Images from Earth's history appeared beside the planet. Ancient battlefields, ruined cities, mushroom clouds, trenches, burning oceans, starving populations, revolutions, civil wars. And after every catastrophe, Sereth said quietly, they survived. The chamber stayed silent now. They survived plagues. They survived global wars. They survived environmental collapse. They survived each other. His voice lowered further. You are not looking at a young species discovering warfare. You are looking at a species shaped by it. Voran remained unmoved. They are divided. Yes, Sereth admitted. They are emotional. Yes. They are irrational. Frequently, the commander spread his upper hand slightly. Then what exactly concerns you? Sareth finally looked directly at him. The fact that they are still here. That answer irritated several council members immediately. One of them struck the table with irritation. You exaggerate primitives into predators. No, Sareth replied softly. I believe you are mistaking survival traits for weakness. Vorin stepped closer to the holographic Earth. Ambassador, he said patiently. History favors organized power. Yes, Sareth answered. But humans were born in chaos. The room went still again. For a moment, something uncomfortable passed through the chamber. Not fear, but the shadow of it. Then it disappeared. Because certainty was easier. Vorin deactivated the images with a gesture. The Dominion cannot allow an unstable species to expand unchecked, he announced. Humanity will be pacified before it becomes a future threat. One by one, the council members raised their hands in approval. 12 votes. Unanimous. Except for Sareth. He did not raise his hand. The recorder drone floated above the chamber. Resolution approved. It announced mechanically. Military pacification campaign authorized. The council chamber erupted into rhythmic strikes of approval against the metal tables. The sound echoed like war drums. Only Sareth remained motionless. Because unlike everyone else in that chamber, he already understood something terrible. The Dominion believed it was about to fight a weak species. But humanity had never survived because it was weak. And somewhere far away on a small blue planet, humans still had no idea a galactic empire had just declared war on them. 3 days after the vote, Ambassador Sareth stood alone on the observation platform of Station Keeler and watched human space traffic move through the stars. Cargo vessels, mining ships, civilian transports, nothing impressive. At least not to Dominion eyes. The ships looked inefficient compared to Dominion engineering. Their designs lacked symmetry. Their engines emitted uneven heat signatures. Some of them even carried visible repair plating across their hulls. A Dominion officer standing nearby gave a quiet snort of amusement. These are the creatures the Council fears? Sareth did not answer immediately. Instead, he watched one of the human freighters drift toward docking control while arguing loudly with station traffic operators over communication channels. The human captain sounded irritated, then sarcastic, then somehow friendly. Within 30 seconds, the argument ended with laughter. The officer beside Sareth looked confused. They argue constantly. Yes, Sareth said. They also cooperate constantly. That makes no sense. Sareth almost smiled. That, he said quietly, is humanity. The officer folded 2 arms behind his back. With respect, Ambassador, the reports are clear. Humans are fragmented. Their governments distrust each other. Their military structures differ wildly. They have no unified doctrine. That is correct. Then why were you opposed to the campaign? Now Sareth finally turned toward him. Because your reports only measured what humans are. You never measured what humans become under pressure. The officer frowned slightly. Sareth activated a small holographic display. Human history appeared in the air between them. Wars. Thousands of them. The officer stared. There are errors in this archive. No. The casualty numbers alone are impossible. They are accurate. Images shifted rapidly. Armored cavalry charges. Trench warfare. Nuclear detonations. Drone strikes. Ruined cities. Riots. Revolutions. Planetary conflicts. The Dominion officer's expression slowly changed. This all occurred on one planet? Yes. In only 40,000 years? Yes. The officer stared at the numbers again. Dominion civilization had fought 12 major wars in 6,000 years. Humanity had fought more than that in single centuries. The realization clearly unsettled him. Why? He asked finally. Sareth gave the only honest answer. Humans always find something worth fighting over. The officer looked disturbed. That sounds unstable. It is unstable. Then how did they survive long enough to become spacefaring? Sareth looked back toward the moving human ships beyond the station glass. Because humans adapt faster than they destroy themselves. The officer said nothing. Sareth continued quietly. You see division. I see evolutionary pressure. You see chaos. I see constant refinement. You see emotional instability. I see a species that learned survival through suffering. The holographic images shifted again. Human soldiers appeared from different centuries. Ancient warriors. Modern infantry. Resistance fighters. Special operations units. Civilians carrying improvised weapons. They never stopped learning, Sareth said. Every war became a lesson. Every failure became doctrine. Every disaster taught adaptation. The officer crossed his arms. But they still lose wars. Yes, Sareth said. Constantly. That answer surprised him. Then why fear them? Sareth deactivated the display. Because losing does not stop humans. Silence. The station lights reflected faintly across the ambassador's pale eyes. Most species fight until defeat becomes mathematically certain, he explained. Humans fight until physically incapable of continuing. The officer shifted uneasily now. That is irrational. Yes. That is dangerous. Yes. And you believe they will resist the Dominion? Sareth looked directly at him. I believe the Dominion has mistaken human division for weakness. He paused. And that mistake is going to cost millions of lives. Far away, beyond Dominion space, the first invasion fleets were already moving. Hundreds of warships slipped silently through dark space toward the outer human colonies. Inside those ships, Dominion commanders reviewed tactical predictions with calm professionalism. Everything remained orderly, expected, controlled. The first colonies targeted were mining settlements, low population, minimal defenses, no major military presence, perfect opening targets. The campaign doctrine was simple. Strike quickly. Demonstrate overwhelming superiority. Force surrender before resistance organizes. It had worked for centuries. Subcommander Talvek reviewed the operational timeline from the bridge of his flagship. Projected colony surrender. Under 6 hours. Projected casualties minimal. He approved the assault sequence without hesitation. Around him, Dominion officers moved with disciplined efficiency. Nobody looked nervous. Why would they? They were professionals. They were veterans. They represented the greatest military machine in known space. And they were about to attack miners. Meanwhile, on the human colony world of Kepler 91b, Governor Elias Kane was eating reheated noodles while reviewing infrastructure repair requests when the emergency alert sirens activated across the settlement. Every screen in the colony suddenly flashed red. Unknown fleet detected. The governor froze. Outside his office window, civilians stopped walking. Above the colony, enormous shadows appeared against the stars. Someone whispered, "Those aren't human ships." Then the communication systems activated. A cold alien voice echoed across every speaker in the colony. "Attention, human settlement. You are now under the authority of the Dominion. Surrender immediately. Resistance will be met with force." Silence followed. Across the colony, miners looked at each other. Engineers stopped working. Mechanics stared upward. Civilians stood frozen. Governor Kane slowly stood from his desk. Fear moved through him immediately. Real fear. Not movie fear. Not abstract fear. The kind that turns your hands cold. He looked again at the massive fleet hanging above the colony. They could not win. Everyone understood that instantly. Then something unexpected happened. Nobody panicked. Nobody screamed. Instead, one of the miners quietly asked, "So what do we do now?" And for the first time in Dominion history, humanity began to answer. Governor Elias Kane stood inside the colony command center staring at the invasion fleet above Kepler 91b. 6 ships. That was all. But each one was enormous. Dark metal hulls blocked out sections of the stars as they drifted silently above the colony atmosphere like predators that already knew the outcome. Around Kane, Emergency alarms continued flashing red. Colony personnel moved rapidly between terminals. Communications officers attempted to contact Earth. No response yet. Long-range channels were jammed. Someone cursed under their breath. A young technician looked up from her station. "Governor, what are your orders?" That question settled over the room heavily. Orders? What orders exactly existed for an alien invasion? Kane's mind raced. The colony had 82,000 civilians. No standing military force. Mining equipment. Industrial explosives. Limited security weapons. Against warships. Against an interstellar empire. The logical answer was obvious. Surrender. And everyone in that room knew it. Then the alien transmission returned. "Human colony," the voice repeated calmly. "You have 5 minutes to acknowledge surrender terms." Kane slowly looked around the command center. Nobody spoke. Nobody suggested surrender. Not because they were brave. Because they were thinking. That was the strange thing about humans. Fear rarely stopped them from thinking. An older engineer finally broke the silence. "If they take the mines," he said quietly, "Earth loses the sector." Another worker nodded. "And the fuel refineries." A security officer added, "They'll use the colony as a staging ground." More silence. Kane understood suddenly. Everyone here already knew the situation was hopeless. But hopeless did not automatically mean surrender. That difference, that tiny psychological difference, would soon terrify the Dominion. The governor exhaled slowly. "Open a channel." The communications officer hesitated. "Governor, open it." The channel activated. Dominion Subcommander Talvek appeared on the main display. Tall, armored, emotionless. Behind him stood rows of disciplined officers illuminated by blue tactical light. Everything about the alien commander radiated control. "You are Governor Elias Kane?" Talvek asked. "Yes. You understand your position?" Kane looked at the invasion fleet again through the command center window. "Yes." "Then acknowledge surrender and prepare your population for processing." The room behind Kane stayed silent. Talvek waited calmly. This was the normal part. This was how these operations always ended. Fear. Acceptance. Compliance. Instead, Governor Kane asked a question. "What happens if we refuse?" Talvek answered immediately. "You will be pacified by force. No anger. No threat. Just certainty." Kane nodded slowly, like a man finishing a calculation. Then he spoke the single word that would later appear in Dominion military academies for centuries. "No." The command bridge of the Dominion flagship went completely still. Talvek stared at the screen. Perhaps translation failed. "I do not believe you understand," he said carefully. "We possess overwhelming military superiority." "Yeah," Kane replied. "Probably." Talvek blinked once. "Then why refuse surrender?" Kane leaned slightly against the command console. Not dramatically, not heroically, just tired. Because he had already accepted what was coming. "Because this colony is ours," he said quietly. "And you don't get to have it." Silence filled both command centers. The Dominion officers looked confused. Not angry, confused. This response did not fit the models. Talvek studied the human governor carefully. No visible hysteria. No irrational screaming. No desperate bargaining. The human simply looked resolved. Like a worker preparing for difficult labor. Talvek finally spoke again. "You cannot win." Governor Kane nodded once. "Probably not." "Then your resistance serves no purpose." That was when Kane smiled slightly. A small, exhausted smile. "Sure it does." Talvek frowned. "What purpose?" The governor looked directly into the alien commander's eyes. "Time." Then the transmission ended. For several seconds, nobody on the Dominion bridge moved. One tactical officer finally spoke. "Sir, thermal scans show significant civilian movement across the colony." Another officer interrupted. "Mining equipment is being repositioned. Underground transport systems are activating." Industrial power signatures increasing across multiple sectors. Talvek's secondary eyes narrowed. What are they doing? The answer arrived quickly. A stunned sensor analyst looked up from his station. They're fortifying the mines. Another pause. Talvek could barely believe the words himself. Civilians? Yes, sir. Against orbital warships? Yes, sir. The subcommander stared silently at the tactical display. Then he gave the order. Deploy ground forces. Across Kepler 91b, humanity moved with terrifying speed. Not organized speed. Human speed. Messy. Improvised. Adaptive. Miners welded heavy drilling vehicles into barricades across tunnel entrances. Engineers converted excavation lasers into defensive weapons. Cargo elevators became troop lifts. Maintenance tunnels became ambush routes. Old veterans emerged quietly from civilian populations. A mechanic who once served in Earth's Pacific Defense Fleet. A former infantrywoman working refinery maintenance. An old security contractor nobody had thought about in years. Suddenly they were teaching civilians where to place explosives, how to fire rail rifles, how to move through tunnels silently, how to survive urban combat. The transformation happened almost instantly, because humanity had done this before, not against aliens, against each other, for thousands of years. Deep underground, a teenage worker named Lena Ortiz helped stack supply crates beside a tunnel checkpoint while listening to distant drilling sounds echo through the rock. Her hands trembled. She was terrified. Everyone was terrified. That was normal. Fear was normal. The important thing was that humans kept moving anyway. Nearby, an older miner handed her a compact kinetic pistol. You know how to use one? No. Good time to learn. Above the colony, Dominion landing craft descended through the atmosphere. Talvek watched calmly from orbit. This would still end quickly. It had to. No civilization could seriously resist the Dominion with mining tools and civilians. The operation would simply require slightly more force than expected. Nothing more. But as the first Dominion troops entered the underground mining networks, something strange happened. The humans vanished. Sensors showed movement everywhere. Gunfire erupted from impossible angles. Explosives collapsed tunnels behind advancing Dominion forces. Entire sections of the underground map became useless. The colony itself seemed alive. And for the first time in his career, Subcommander Talvek experienced something deeply unfamiliar. Not fear. Not yet. Uncertainty. The battle for Kepler 91b lasted 18 days. Dominion High Command had projected 36 hours. By day 4, Subcommander Talvek stopped using the word pacification in his reports. By day 7, casualty projections tripled. By day 10, Dominion tactical analysts began openly arguing with each other. Nothing about the humans behaved correctly. That was the problem. Inside the underground tunnel systems, Dominion troops encountered resistance patterns that changed constantly. One tunnel would contain carefully layered ambushes with military precision. The next would be defended by civilians using mining charges wired to fuel lines in ways that made absolutely no tactical sense. Humans abandoned strong defensive positions without warning, then attacked from places Dominion scans declared inaccessible. They used maintenance shafts, coolant vents, abandoned drilling routes, collapsed rock channels. Anything became a battlefield if humans decided it was. And they always decided unexpectedly. Talvek stood over the holographic combat display aboard his flagship, staring at a battlefield that no longer resembled military logic. Red casualty indicators blinked across the map. Too many. Far too many. A tactical officer approached carefully. Sir, Tunnel Sector 14 has gone dark again. Talvek closed two eyes briefly. What happened this time? Human workers detonated support structures after allowing our advanced teams inside. How many casualties? The officer hesitated. 42. Talvek stared silently at the display. 42 soldiers. Dead because miners destroyed their own tunnel system while still inside it. That part disturbed him most. Humans kept sacrificing positions they could not hold. Not emotionally, practically, like accountants balancing numbers. The Dominion understood glorious last stands. Every species admired courage. But humans were doing something else entirely. They treated warfare like engineering. Cold, adaptive, efficient, and deeply personal at the same time. Another officer suddenly looked up from sensor control. "Sir, movement detected behind our secured zone." Talvek turned sharply. "That is impossible." "Yes, sir." A new tactical display appeared. Human fighters had somehow crossed behind Dominion lines through tunnel systems believed destroyed 3 days earlier. Minutes later, supply explosions echoed across the underground network. The lights flickered. Communications failed briefly. Then came the most disturbing report so far. "Sir, they are targeting food distribution routes." Talvek frowned. "Why?" The officer looked uncertain. "They appear to understand our operational dependency chain." That sentence stayed in Talvek's mind long after the briefing ended. Operational dependency chain. Humans should not understand Dominion military logistics this quickly. But they did. Because humans studied war differently. Dominion doctrine focused on victory. Human doctrine focused on survival. Those were not the same thing. Far below the colony surface, former Earth Marine Daniel Reyes crouched beside a tunnel barricade listening to distant Dominion troop movements echo through the stone. Around him, miners checked ammunition. Engineers wired explosives. Exhausted civilians drank recycled water in silence. Nobody talked about winning anymore. That conversation ended days ago. Now they talked about slowing advances, damaging supply routes, buying time. Reyes checked the crude tactical map painted across the tunnel wall. A young civilian beside him swallowed nervously. "How much longer do we hold this section?" Reyes answered honestly. "Until we can't." The civilian nodded like that answer made sense. Because to humans, it did. A loud explosion shook dust from the tunnel ceiling. Somewhere nearby, another defensive line collapsed. Another group died. Another delay bought another hour. That was enough. The Dominion still did not understand the real battlefield. Kepler 91b itself was not important anymore. Time was, and humanity was spending lives to purchase it. Above the colony, Talvek finally transmitted his revised assessment to Dominion High Command. He chose his wording carefully. Human resistance displays non-standard tactical flexibility. Enemy combatants show willingness to continue engagement despite impossible victory probabilities. Civilian populations demonstrate unexpectedly high combat adaptation. He paused before adding the final line. Current resistance psychology does not align with predictive surrender models. The report transmitted instantly toward Dominion Central Command. Several systems away, High Commander Vorin reviewed the update in silence. Then another report arrived. And another. Different colonies. Same problems. Human settlements refusing surrender. Civilian resistance movements forming immediately. Improvised tactics evolving faster than Dominion countermeasures. One report described farmers weaponizing atmospheric irrigation systems. Another described civilian cargo pilots using transport ships as kinetic attack craft. A third detailed how human engineers flooded underground tunnels with coolant vapor before attacking through frozen visibility conditions. Every colony fought differently. That was becoming the nightmare. Dominion military doctrine relied on pattern recognition. Every species eventually revealed patterns. Humans did not. Or worse, their pattern was adaptation itself. Vorin activated a direct communication channel. Ambassador Sereth appeared moments later holding a steaming human beverage the translator identified as coffee. The commander ignored it. "You predicted resistance," Vorin said immediately. "Yes. You did not predict this." Sereth looked tired. "No," he admitted quietly. "This is worse." Vorin's eyes narrowed. "How are they coordinating?" "They aren't. That is impossible." Sereth shook his head slowly. "You still think humans require centralized control to behave collectively." Every species does. Humans don't. The commander stared at him. Sareth took a slow sip of coffee before continuing. You are waiting for human governments to organize resistance. You are waiting for military command structures. You are waiting for coherent doctrine. He lowered the cup slightly. But humanity has spent thousands of years surviving disasters where command structures collapsed. Vorin remained silent. So what are we fighting? He finally asked. The ambassador looked directly into his eyes. A species where individual resistance is instinctive. Silence stretched between them. Then Sareth added the sentence Vorin would remember for the rest of his life. You are not fighting the human military. You are fighting humanity itself. The transmission ended. For the first time in decades, High Commander Vorin did not immediately know what to do next. And deep inside Dominion space, military analysts began reading human history for the first time. That was when the real fear started. 18 days after the invasion began, Kepler 91b finally fell. At least officially. Dominion banners rose above the main colony structures. The orbital docks were secured. Communication towers were under Dominion control. According to military protocol, the operation was complete. Except it wasn't. Because every night after the victory, explosions still echoed beneath the colony surface. Supply convoys vanished. Power systems failed mysteriously. Patrol squads disappeared into tunnels and never returned. The humans kept fighting, even after losing. That fact disturbed Dominion commanders more than the resistance itself. Subcommander Talvek stood inside the captured colony administration building reviewing updated casualty reports. 312 Dominion soldiers dead. Against miners, engineers, civilians. Impossible numbers. A tactical officer approached carefully. Sir. Another fuel depot was destroyed overnight. Talvek barely reacted anymore. How? Unknown. Unknown. The officer swallowed. Human workers used thermal drilling charges from inside maintenance shafts we believed sealed. Talvek stared at him for several long seconds, then quietly asked, how many maintenance shafts exist on this colony? The officer hesitated. We no longer know, sir. That answer summarized the entire war perfectly. The Dominion had conquered the surface. The humans still controlled reality underneath it. And worse, every hour the war continued, humanity learned faster. Across 23 occupied colonies, the same pattern emerged. Resistance cells adapting independently. Civilians transforming into fighters. Dominion logistics suffering constant disruption. Casualty numbers climbing steadily. The projections changed again. 14-month campaign became 28 months. Then, 41 months. High Commander Vorin reviewed the revised timeline in silence. His advisors stood around the strategy chamber visibly uncomfortable. Nobody wanted to speak first. Fleet Admiral Caress finally broke the silence. The problem is not military capability. Vorin looked toward her. Explain. The humans are not engaging conventionally. That is obvious. No, sir, Caress replied carefully. I mean they are actively avoiding the kind of war we prepared for. A holographic battle map activated above the table. Human activity spread across the display like scattered sparks. No front lines. No centralized structure. No predictable military concentrations. Just constant movement. Constant disruption. Constant pressure. They retreat before major engagements, Caress continued. They target supply infrastructure instead of fleet concentrations. They attack communication nodes, fuel transports, relay systems. She paused. They are fighting to exhaust us. One intelligence officer shook his head immediately. That strategy cannot succeed long-term. Mathematically, no, Caress agreed. But mathematically, the colonies should have surrendered already. Silence. That sentence landed heavily, because everyone in the room understood the truth now. Humanity was not behaving rationally, and that made Dominion superiority strangely difficult to apply. Then another report arrived. A patrol corridor near the Proxima relay systems had gone dark. 3 Dominion monitoring stations destroyed. No fleet signatures detected entering or leaving the area. Voron frowned. How? Nobody answered. 3 hours later the answer came. Human ships. Dozens of them. Hidden in debris fields for days without detection. Waiting. The tactical footage shocked Dominion Command. Human vessels moved unlike anything in Dominion battle doctrine. Instead of holding formation, they split apart, regrouped unpredictably, altered vectors constantly, used debris and gravity fields aggressively. Even more disturbing, their ships were communicating in encrypted bursts Dominion systems could not decode fast enough. A sensor analyst stared at the battle footage in disbelief. They're improvising mid-engagement. That's impossible, another officer replied immediately. No fleet can coordinate that quickly. But the humans were. Because they had done something the Dominion never considered necessary. They trained commanders to think independently. The first major Dominion fleet loss happened near the Kepler Gate relay corridor. It began with what appeared to be a human retreat. Dominion pursuit forces advanced aggressively, exactly as human commanders predicted. Then the battlefield changed instantly. Hidden human attack groups emerged from silent positions inside the surrounding debris fields. Railgun fire erupted from impossible angles. Electronic warfare systems blinded Dominion targeting arrays. Human attack craft slammed directly into communication vessels. Within 43 minutes, 9 Dominion ships destroyed, 14 heavily damaged. Command coordination collapsed. The Dominion fleet withdrew in confusion. Not because they lacked firepower, because they no longer understood the battlefield. The news spread rapidly across nearby systems. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion had lost a major engagement, and humanity had not won through superior technology. That was the terrifying part. They won through unpredictability. On Earth, Admiral Sofia Yanez stood inside Unified Earth Defense Command watching battle reports flood across the strategic display. Around her, military personnel moved continuously between stations. No celebration filled the room, only focus. Humanity had survived the opening stage of the war. Now came the dangerous part, counteroffensive. Yanez studied the tactical reports carefully. Dominion response times are slowing, one officer noted. Good, Yanez replied. Another analyst spoke up. Their fleets still outnumber us significantly. I know. Then what's the plan? The admiral finally looked up. Her expression stayed calm. We make the war too expensive. Simple, cold, human. One officer hesitated before asking the question everyone feared. How long can we sustain this? Yanez answered honestly. Longer than they think. Then she turned back toward the tactical display. Across human space, hidden fleets activated. Resistance cells synchronized. Supply networks expanded. Dormant defense systems awakened. Humanity had spent months preparing quietly while the colonies bled for time. Now the preparation ended. Now humanity stopped defending and started hunting. The war changed in month 4. Until then, the Dominion still believed victory was inevitable. Costly now. Complicated now. Embarrassing, certainly, but still inevitable. Then the supply fleets started disappearing. Not occasionally. Constantly. Entire Dominion convoys vanished while traveling through supposedly secure corridors. Fuel transports exploded without warning. Communication relays went silent. Forward operating bases woke up surrounded by human sabotage teams already inside defensive perimeters. And nowhere could Dominion intelligence identify a central command structure controlling it all. That was what terrified them most. The humans fought like a single organism, without behaving like one. Fleet Admiral Caress stood in Dominion Strategic Command staring at a casualty projection that no longer looked like victory mathematics. Red indicators spread across human space faster every week. A logistics officer approached nervously. Admiral, we lost another supply chain near the outer corridor. Caress closed her eyes briefly. How many ships? 8 confirmed destroyed. By what? The officer hesitated. That's the problem. Caress turned sharply. What does that mean? The attack patterns don't match previous human fleet behavior. A new tactical recording appeared above the command table. Human ships emerged from sensor shadows in complete silence. No formation. No visible command hierarchy. They attacked aggressively for exactly 6 minutes. Then disappeared before Dominion reinforcements arrived. Precise. Efficient. Calculated. One tactical analyst looked pale. They knew exactly where our escort ships would reposition. Another officer spoke quietly. They're learning our response patterns. No one answered immediately, because everyone knew the implication. The longer the war continued, the more dangerous humanity became. Across occupied colonies, Dominion soldiers reported increasing psychological fatigue. Not fear of dying. Professional soldiers accepted death. This was something else. A patrol commander on Brennus colony described it best in his field report. The humans do not behave like a defeated population. They behave like a population waiting for opportunities. That sentence spread rapidly through Dominion military circles. Waiting for opportunities. The humans were patient. That was new. Most conquered species either surrendered or broke psychologically under prolonged occupation. Humans adapted instead. Every occupation became a classroom. Every defeat became training. And every Dominion mistake was studied immediately. Subcommander Talvek learned that personally. 3 months after the capture of Kepler 91b, his forces technically controlled the colony. Technically, reality was different. Human resistance fighters moved through the underground networks almost freely now. Dominion troops controlled buildings. Humans controlled everything between them. One evening Talvek reviewed another sabotage report while exhausted officers stood silently nearby. Power grid failure. Food storage contamination. Communications disruption. Again. Finally Talvek looked up. How many resistance fighters remain active? The intelligence officer answered carefully. We cannot determine exact numbers. Estimate. The officer hesitated too long. Talvek's voice hardened. Estimate. Possibly most of the colony population, sir. Silence. That answer should have been impossible. No resistance movement maintained that level of support after months of occupation. Unless, Talvek slowly realized the horrifying truth. The resistance was not a separate group. The resistance was the colony itself. A mechanic repaired Dominion equipment during the day and transported ammunition through tunnels at night. A medic treated wounded Dominion troops while secretly relaying movement patterns to resistance cells. Miners forced to excavate damaged sectors intentionally created hidden pathways beneath Dominion positions. Every civilian interaction became suspect. Every worker potentially hostile. Every silence threatening. The occupation was poisoning Dominion morale. And humanity understood exactly how to exploit that. Meanwhile, far deeper inside human space, Admiral Sofia Yanez prepared the next stage of the war. The briefing room aboard the carrier Resolute remained dim except for the holographic battlefield suspended above the officers. 300 human vessels waited in hidden staging areas across multiple systems. Not enough to overpower the Dominion directly. Enough to bleed them continuously. A commander studied the projected engagement zones carefully. We still can't win a direct fleet confrontation. Yanez nodded once. Correct. Then our objective remains attrition? No, Yanez replied calmly. The room quieted. Our objective is exhaustion. The hologram shifted. Dominion logistics corridors illuminated across the map. Supply routes, fuel depots, communications relays. Repair infrastructure, human targets. We are not fighting their fleets, Yanez explained. We are fighting their ability to sustain fleets. An intelligence officer looked uncertain. That could take years. Yes. Another silence settled over the room. Not discouraged. Focused. Human military history contained thousands of wars. Many lasted decades. Humanity understood prolonged conflict psychologically in ways the Dominion simply didn't. Yanez finally looked around the room. The Dominion believes superior force guarantees victory. Her expression hardened slightly. We're going to teach them otherwise. Far away, High Commander Vorin reviewed the newest psychological assessments from frontline units. He disliked psychological reports. They were imprecise, emotional, uncomfortable, but the numbers forced attention now. Dominion soldiers reported hesitation before engagements, increasing combat stress, fear of ambush, declining operational confidence. One sentence appeared repeatedly across multiple independent reports. Humans never react the way we expect. Vorin read that line 3 times. Then again. For the first time since the war began, he finally allowed himself to consider a possibility he had rejected completely before. Not defeat. Something worse. A war without predictable end. And in military history, those were the wars that destroyed empires. By month 6, the Dominion still possessed the larger military. Larger fleets. More resources. Superior industrial output. Centuries of combat experience. On paper, victory still belonged to them. But wars were not fought on paper. They were fought in time. And humanity had begun turning time itself into a weapon. Every additional week of conflict produced the same results. Dominion supply costs increased. Fleet maintenance slowed. Occupied colonies became unstable. Casualty reports climbed steadily. Meanwhile, humanity grew stronger. Not because they suffered fewer losses, because suffering hardened their systems faster. The Dominion had prepared for conquest. Humanity had prepared for survival. Those were fundamentally different things. Admiral Sofia Yanez watched the latest battlefield reports from the command deck of the UEDC carrier Resolute. 3 Dominion fuel convoys destroyed. 2 communication stations compromised. 1 occupied colony liberated by coordinated resistance attacks. Not decisive victories. That was the important part. Humanity avoided decisive battles whenever possible. Instead, they accumulated pressure. Small losses. Constant losses. Exhausting losses. A young operations officer looked up from the tactical display. Dominion fleet activity slowing near the outer rim sectors. Yanez nodded slightly. They're stretching logistics too far. Another officer spoke carefully. They still outnumber us almost 2 to 1. Yes. Then why are they slowing down? The Admiral activated a larger strategic map. Red Dominion supply routes stretched across dozens of systems. Human attacks blinked everywhere along them like infections spreading through arteries. Because they built their military for controlled wars, Yanez explained. We built ours while fighting ourselves for 40,000 years. The room stayed quiet. Everyone understood what she meant. Humanity's greatest military advantage was not technology. It was familiarity with chaos. Humans expected systems to fail, expected plans to collapse, expected disasters. And because they expected failure, they adapted faster when it arrived. Dominion Command still searched desperately for the center of human coordination. They never found one, because there wasn't one. Humanity operated through overlapping layers: military command, civilian resistance, local initiative, independent fleet groups, decentralized intelligence networks. Remove one layer, the others continued functioning. The Dominion could not cripple humanity with a single decisive strike because humanity had evolved specifically to survive fragmentation. That realization slowly spread fear through Dominion High Command. Fleet Admiral Caress stood before the Central Strategy Council reviewing updated projections. None of them looked good anymore. Projected campaign duration: 72 months. Projected material strain: severe. Probability of total occupation: declining. The room felt colder than usual. One logistics officer finally broke the silence. At current rates, continued operations will begin impacting core Dominion infrastructure within 22 months. Another commander reacted immediately. That projection is exaggerated. No, the logistics officer replied quietly. We are consuming fleet resources faster than industrial replenishment. The room grew tense, because nobody in Dominion history had ever spoken this way before. The Dominion did not run out of resources. The Dominion exhausted others. Now human strategy was reversing the equation. Voron remained silent throughout the discussion. But internally, something uncomfortable had begun growing inside him. Not panic. Recognition. He was beginning to understand humanity. And understanding them made the war far more frightening. A tactical analyst activated another battlefield recording. Human civilian vessels drifted silently through debris fields disguised as wreckage. When Dominion patrols approached, hidden weapon systems activated instantly. The attack lasted only 4 minutes. Then the civilian ships self-destructed before capture. One council member looked horrified. They destroyed themselves? Yes. Why? Nobody answered immediately, because the answer challenged Dominion assumptions about warfare itself. Humans viewed sacrifice differently. Dominion doctrine valued preservation of military assets above all. Humans valued outcomes. If sacrificing one ship destroyed 3 enemy vessels and delayed a supply route for 2 days, humans considered the exchange acceptable. Not emotionally. Mathematically, that was what terrified Dominion analysts most. Human irrationality contained its own logic. And once that logic became visible, it looked horrifyingly effective. Meanwhile, on the occupied colony world of New Carthage, 17-year-old Maya Chan moved carefully through a hidden tunnel beneath Dominion patrol sectors carrying medical supplies across her shoulders. The tunnel walls vibrated faintly from distant machinery overhead. Dominion forces controlled the surface completely now. But underground, the resistance remained alive. Maya passed exhausted civilians resting beside supply caches. Teachers, mechanics, students, miners, engineers. None of them looked like soldiers. That no longer mattered. A resistance coordinator quietly checked the supplies she carried. Any problems above? 2 patrols near Sector 12, Maya whispered. Did they see you? No. The coordinator nodded once. Good work. Maya sat against the tunnel wall briefly, trying to slow her breathing. She had not slept properly in weeks. Nobody had. Across the tunnel, an older woman carefully cleaned a rifle while humming softly to herself. The normality of it felt surreal. Maya finally asked the question that haunted everyone. Do you think we can actually win? The older woman looked up, then surprised Maya by shaking her head. Maybe not. Maya stared at her. Then why keep fighting? The woman considered the question carefully before answering. Because if we stop, she gestured upward toward the occupied colony above them. Then this becomes normal. Maya said nothing, but she understood. That was the true core of human resistance. Not victory, refusal. Far above the colony surface, Dominion occupation forces continued struggling to suppress a population that simply would not psychologically surrender. Every week the resistance survived. Every convoy destroyed. Every hidden attack. Humanity sent the same message repeatedly. We are still here. And slowly, that message began breaking the confidence of an empire that had never imagined anyone could endure this long against them. Month 8. The Dominion abandoned the idea of limited war. High Commander Voron stood inside the central strategy chamber watching thousands of fleet markers gather across the holographic map. Reserve fleets activated. Border garrisons redeployed. Allied military pacts invoked. The largest military force assembled in 4 centuries began moving toward human space. Toward Earth. Voron studied the projections carefully. This was still winnable. Costly now. Far costlier than expected. But winnable. Humanity's resistance depended on distance, mobility, and prolonged attrition. Earth changed that. Every psychological analysis said the same thing. Earth was humanity's emotional center. Take Earth, break morale, end resistance. Simple, logical, the kind of strategy that had ended countless wars throughout Dominion history. Except humanity did not think about Earth the way Dominion analysts believed. Humans loved Earth. But they did not love it because it was fragile. They loved it because it was home. And humans defended home differently than territory. Vorin gave the final order. All fleets advance. Across Dominion space, thousands of warships accelerated toward the Sol system. The stars themselves seemed to move beneath the weight of the invasion force. Meanwhile on Earth, humanity was waiting. Admiral Sofia Yanez stood inside Unified Earth Defense Command watching incoming fleet telemetry flood the strategic displays. No panic filled the command center. Only preparation, because humanity had known this was coming for months. Every occupied colony, every resistance cell, every delaying action, had purchased time for this exact moment. And humanity had used every second of it. The Sol system no longer resembled the peaceful birthplace Dominion intelligence expected. Orbital defense platforms, hidden within asteroid clusters, activated silently. Civilian infrastructure transformed into military support networks. Mining colonies revealed concealed railgun arrays buried inside moons and debris belts. Thousands of autonomous drones drifted invisibly through defensive sectors waiting for activation commands. Even the empty space around Earth had become weaponized. A tactical officer spoke quietly. Dominion advance groups entering outer sensor range. Yanez nodded once. Fleet status. Ready. Civilian evacuation? Complete. Defense grid. Online across all sectors. Another silence settled across the room. Not fear. Focus. The Admiral looked around at the exhausted officers surrounding her. Most had barely slept in months. Some had lost family on occupied colonies. Others carried fresh casualty reports still sitting unread beside their stations. Nobody asked if Earth could survive. That question no longer mattered. Humanity had already decided the answer months ago. They would hold, whatever it cost. Far beyond Pluto's orbit, the first Dominion fleet formations emerged from hyperspace. Thousands of ships. The sight would have terrified almost any civilization in the galaxy. Instead, human defense systems calmly began tracking firing solutions. Fleet Admiral Caress stood aboard the Dominion flagship watching Earth grow larger across the tactical display. Even now, the planet looked harmless. Blue oceans, cloud systems, fragile atmosphere, beautiful, vulnerable. Yet something about the silence around the system disturbed her deeply. Humanity had spent 8 months proving they never fought predictably. And now they were waiting. That alone felt wrong. Advance the formation, Vorin ordered. The Dominion fleet moved inward. Then the system exploded. Hidden railgun batteries fired from asteroid fields. Autonomous attack drones surged from debris clusters. Electronic warfare systems ignited across multiple sectors simultaneously. Entire Dominion sensor networks flooded with false targets instantly. Human ships emerged from impossible angles. Not charging directly, shaping movement, manipulating fleet positioning. Exactly as planned. Vorin reacted immediately. Reorganized sectors 3 and 5. But the humans had anticipated the adjustment before he gave it. New attack groups struck the shifting Dominion flanks the moment repositioning began. Fleet formations destabilized. Not catastrophically, strategically. That was the nightmare. Human commanders weren't trying to overpower the Dominion fleet. They were constructing battlefield conditions. One layer at a time. Caress suddenly understood. They built the entire system into a trap. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Nearby tactical officers looked pale now, because the realization was undeniable. Humanity had not spent 8 months preparing defenses. Humanity had spent 8 months preparing a battlefield. The war reached Earth orbit on day 2. Human and Dominion fleets clashed above the blue curve of the planet in continuous waves of kinetic fire and electronic warfare. Destroyed ships burned silently through vacuum. Orbital stations collapsed in brilliant explosions. Thousands died every hour. Still, humanity refused to retreat. And the most horrifying part, the humans looked prepared for every Dominion move. A Dominion assault group advanced toward Luna. Human forces redirected them directly into overlapping kill zones hidden between mining stations. A carrier formation attempted flanking maneuvers near Mars transfer routes. Human interdiction fleets emerged from silent positions inside debris corridors. Every advance encountered resistance already waiting. By day 3, Dominion casualty projections surpassed every previous war in recorded history. Voron stood motionless inside his command bridge, watching the tactical display slowly turn against him. Not completely, not decisively, but steadily, relentlessly. The humans bent constantly without breaking. And worse, Dominion soldiers were beginning to hesitate. Not because humans were stronger, because humans remained impossible to predict. One tactical officer finally spoke the thought infecting every fleet in the system. "Sir." Voron looked toward him. The officer swallowed once. What if they planned for all of this? Silence. Because suddenly, that possibility no longer sounded irrational. It sounded obvious. And somewhere deep within the chaos of the battle for Earth, humanity finally revealed its most terrifying characteristic of all. Not aggression. Not endurance. Preparation. The battle for Earth lasted 4 days. By the end of day 4, the Dominion still possessed enough ships to continue fighting. That was what made the situation so horrifying. They were not losing traditionally. Their fleets still existed. Their weapons still functioned. Their command structures remained intact. But psychologically, something inside the Dominion military had begun to fracture. High Commander Voron stood alone on the command bridge, staring at casualty projections that no longer looked mathematically acceptable. Destroyed ships, highest in Dominion history. Supply depletion, critical. Fleet coordination, degrading. Operational morale, falling rapidly. He read the reports in silence while distant impacts vibrated faintly through the flagship hull. Around him, officers moved carefully now. Nobody spoke loudly anymore. The confidence that once defined Dominion command had disappeared somewhere during the previous months of war. One tactical officer finally approached. "Sir, Allied fleet detachments are requesting emergency communication." Voron activated the channel immediately. 3 Allied commanders appeared across the holographic display. Their expressions alone told him everything before they spoke. The oldest among them finally said it. "We are withdrawing from the campaign." The bridge went silent. Voron stared at them coldly. "You signed mutual defense agreements." "We signed agreements for regional stabilization operations," another commander replied carefully. "This is no longer that." A third commander leaned forward slightly. "You told us humanity would collapse under pressure." Nobody answered, because no one could deny reality anymore. Humanity had done the opposite. Pressure had transformed them into something far more dangerous. The first commander continued quietly. "Our fleets cannot sustain this level of attrition. Our governments cannot justify it. Our populations are beginning to fear the humans." That sentence settled heavily across the bridge. Fear the humans. Not fear defeat. Fear humanity itself. Voron finally spoke. "You would abandon the campaign now?" The commanders exchanged glances. Then one answered honestly. "We believe continuing this war may destabilize the entire region." Translation: humanity was becoming too expensive to fight. The channel closed moments later. Silence returned. Voron looked back toward the tactical display showing human defensive positions surrounding Earth. Months ago he had looked at humanity and seen weakness. Now he finally understood what Sereth had tried to warn them about. Humans did not survive because they were stronger than other species. They survived because they adapted faster under pressure than almost anyone else in the galaxy. And worse, they learned continuously during conflict. Every battle improved them. Every loss refined them. Every failure became instruction. The Dominion had entered the war expecting conquest. Humanity had entered the war expecting suffering. That difference changed everything. Another officer approached cautiously. "Sir, updated psychological reports from frontline units." Voron almost ignored them, then accepted the report anyway. The words inside disturbed him more than casualty numbers ever had. Dominion soldiers reported. hesitation before engagements, fear of pursuing retreating human ships, distrust of battlefield intelligence, exhaustion from constant unpredictability. One line appeared repeatedly across multiple independent units. There is no situation where humans stop fighting. Voron read the sentence twice, then again. For the first time in his entire military career, he experienced doubt. Real doubt. Not about tactics, about assumptions. The war had forced him to confront something deeply uncomfortable. The Dominion's greatest strength had become rigidity. For thousands of years they had perfected systems, perfect logistics, perfect doctrine, perfect hierarchy, perfect strategic modeling. Humanity had evolved differently, messily, violently, chaotically, and because of that chaos, humans adapted to broken systems naturally. The Dominion required stability to function efficiently. Humans expected instability as normal existence. That realization changed the entire war. Far away aboard the UEDC carrier Resolute, Admiral Sofia Yanez reviewed updated battlefield intelligence. Dominion fleet activity slowing. Allied withdrawals confirmed. Long-range supply strain worsening. One exhausted communications officer looked up. "Do you think they'll retreat?" Yanez considered the question carefully. "No. Why not?" "Because empires don't retreat easily." Another officer asked quietly. "Then how does this end?" The admiral looked toward Earth rotating slowly outside the observation window. "With understanding." The room stayed silent. Yanez finally continued. "They still think this war is about territory. But it stopped being about territory months ago. Now it was about psychology. The Dominion needed to understand a simple truth. Humanity could survive longer than the Dominion could tolerate the cost of making them submit. That was the real battlefield. And humanity was winning it. Meanwhile, Ambassador Sareth sat alone inside a neutral observation chamber, holding a cup of coffee, while reading the newest war updates. He looked exhausted, older somehow. The war had unfolded almost exactly as he feared, except humanity had become even more dangerous than he predicted. A message alert suddenly appeared across his terminal. Direct communication request. Origin. High Commander Voron. Sareth stared at it quietly for several seconds before accepting. Voron appeared instantly. The commander looked different now. Not physically, psychologically. The certainty was gone. In its place stood something far heavier. Recognition. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Voron finally asked the question he should have asked before the war began. "What are humans?" Sareth looked at him carefully, then answered softly. "A species that learned survival the hard way." Silence. Voron lowered his eyes briefly. "We underestimated them." "Yes." "We misunderstood them." "Yes." Another long pause followed. Then Voron spoke the words no Dominion commander had said publicly in centuries. "I think this war cannot be won." Sareth closed his eyes briefly. Not in triumph. In relief. Because at last, the Dominion finally understood the enemy they had created. On the 9th month of the war, High Commander Voron ordered the Dominion fleet to cease offensive operations. The command spread slowly across the battlefield. At first, many Dominion captains thought it was an error. Human interception. Electronic warfare interference. False transmission. Because the idea itself seemed impossible. The Dominion did not stop wars. The Dominion finished them. Yet one by one, weapon systems powered down. Attack formations slowed. Forward fleets halted their advance toward Earth. Across human defensive lines, targeting systems remained locked and ready. Nobody trusted the silence. Not immediately. Humanity had learned caution the hard way. 6 hours passed. Then 12. Then 24. No attacks came. No hidden ambushes. No surprise offensives. Only silence. A strange, exhausted silence stretching across a battlefield that had consumed millions of lives. Inside Unified Earth Defense Command, Admiral Sofia Yanez stood in a dim operations room, reviewing the ceasefire reports while officers around her spoke in careful, uncertain voices. One commander finally asked, "Do we believe them?" Yanez answered honestly, "I think they finally understand." No celebration followed. Humanity had survived. But survival and victory were not the same thing. 23 colonies had burned. Entire populations displaced. Countless families shattered across occupied systems. The war had changed humanity permanently. And it had changed the Dominion too. 3 days later, negotiations began aboard a neutral Valkyrie trade station positioned far outside the conflict zone. The conference chamber itself was deliberately uncomfortable. Neutral lighting, neutral atmosphere mix, neutral architecture, nothing familiar, nothing comforting. That was intentional. The galaxy wanted peace. But nobody trusted either side enough for comfort. Ambassador Sareth arrived first, as always carrying coffee. He sat quietly near the edge of the chamber watching diplomats, military officers, and translators slowly file into the room. Then the doors opened again. High Commander Vorin entered alongside the Dominion delegation. Moments later, Dr. Erica Stern arrived representing Unified Earth Defense Command. For several seconds the room remained silent. Nobody quite knew how to begin. 9 months earlier they had been enemies separated by absolute certainty. Now they sat across from each other carrying exhaustion, grief, and the terrifying knowledge of what the war had actually cost. Finally Vorin spoke first. The Dominion recognizes the sovereignty of all human systems and colonies. The translators repeated the sentence carefully across multiple languages. Dr. Stern listened silently. Vorin continued. The Dominion agrees to full military withdrawal from occupied territories. Another pause. The Dominion further recognizes humanity as an equal interstellar power. That sentence changed the room. Not emotionally, historically, because empires did not say such things lightly. Stern folded her hands calmly. And what prevents this from happening again in 20 years? The question lingered heavily. Vorin did not answer immediately, because there was only one truthful answer. Nothing, unless both civilizations changed. Dr. Stern slowly activated a document across the center table. Not surrender terms, framework terms, structures, agreements, mutual deterrence systems, permanent diplomatic representation, joint conflict review councils. The Dominion delegation studied the proposals carefully. One commander finally looked confused. You are asking for transparency agreements? Yes. Shared military observation? Yes. Joint historical review commissions? Yes. The commander frowned slightly. Why? This time Stern answered without hesitation. Because misunderstandings started this war. Silence followed. Then she added quietly, and misunderstandings nearly destroyed 2 civilizations. Sareth watched Vorin carefully from across the room. The commander looked older now. The war had stripped something away from him. Not authority, certainty. Finally Vorin asked the question that mattered most. You want the Dominion to publicly admit fault? Yes. One Dominion officer reacted immediately. That would humiliate the Council. Dr. Stern looked directly at him. No, she said calmly. It would educate the galaxy. Silence. Heavy silence. Because everyone in the room understood what humanity truly wanted. Not revenge. Not conquest. Deterrence. Humanity needed the galaxy to understand. Humans were difficult to conquer. War against them carried terrible cost. Underestimating them was catastrophic. This peace treaty was not built on trust. It was built on memory. Weeks later, the Galactic Council reconvened for the first time since the war began. The chamber looked exactly the same. Cold stone, polished metal, windowless certainty. But the atmosphere had changed completely. Because now everyone in the galaxy knew something they had not known before. Humanity was dangerous. Not because humans were the strongest species. Not because they possessed the best technology. But because they endured. High Commander Vorin stood once again at the center of the chamber. This time there was no confidence in the room. Only attention. He activated the chamber recorder. Then, in front of 12 civilizations, he spoke the words that would reshape interstellar politics forever. The Dominion was wrong. Silence. Absolute silence. Vorin continued. We believed humanity weak because humanity was divided. We believed emotional behavior meant strategic inferiority. We believed prolonged pressure would force surrender. He paused briefly. We misunderstood what humans are. Across the chamber, Ambassador Sereth closed his eyes quietly, because at last, someone had finally listened. Far away on Earth, life slowly continued. Cities rebuilt, ships repaired, colonies recovered, people mourned, people adapted, because that was what humans always did. On the restored colony world of New Carthage, Maya Chun finally stood beside an actual ocean for the first time in her life. Cold wind moved through her hair while waves crashed endlessly against the shore. For several minutes, she simply watched the water silently. 9 months of war behind her, an uncertain future ahead. Nearby, children played along the shoreline like the galaxy had never nearly burned itself apart. Maya smiled faintly. Humanity had survived again. Not because humanity was peaceful. Not because humanity was powerful. But because humanity refused to disappear. And somewhere deep in the stars, the galaxy would never underestimate humans again.